Hello, I'm Michelle Yana-Chan and this is Fast Track's Insider Guide with my top travel tips from around the world. Join the scrum in New Zealand when the Rugby World Cup kicks off September 9th. The tournament begins at Eden Park in Auckland with the host nation playing Tonga, and 6 weeks of games follow across North and South Island. Over the tournament's duration, the country's also throwing the Real New Zealand Festival, showcasing music and art, food and wine, as well as Maori cultural events. As the rains end in Ethiopia, the country will be celebrating their new year, here called Enkutukash. The date, September 11th, is also the feast of St. John the Baptist, and there'll be a special religious procession at Ragwell Church on top of the Entoto mountain, north of the capital, Addis Ababa. One of the oldest, most prestigious ballooning events, the Coupe Aeronautique Gordon Bennett, takes flight September 10th. This year, the event begins in Gap Taillard in the French Alps. The goal, to fly the furthest distance from the launch site. The record stands at over 3,000 kilometers. A few days later, Lleida in Spain will host the European Hot Air Balloon Championship, where serious pilots will be testing their skills. And one of the largest ballooning events, Albuquerque's International Balloon Fiesta, begins October 1st, when hundreds of balloons fill the skies above New Mexico in the USA. In Japan, there's been some good news for the earthquake-hit region of Tohoku. UNESCO's awarded Cultural World Heritage Site status to Hiraizumi's Buddhist temples, which date back nearly 1,000 years. Also new on UNESCO's list is the Ningaloo Coast in Western Australia, which includes more than 500,000 hectares of coral reef. What makes the reef here so special is that it's fringing reef, meaning visitors don't need tanks, but can snorkel just meters from the shore in shallow water. And I've just come back from swimming with whale sharks, where the Gulf of Mexico meets the Caribbean Sea off the Yucatan Peninsula. Look out for my report if you'd like to hear more on what you can see in the waters of a little island called Isla Holbox.
There are times that you can see dolphins, flamingos, turtles, mantas, and of course the whale sharks. There are times that we see all that on the same time.
And there are still a few months left of the season. I also visited some spectacular Mayan ruins, including the most popular of all, Chichen Itza, which some believe was used as a solar calendar over 1,000 years ago. At the autumn equinox on September 21st, the play of sunlight and shadow creates an image of a plumed serpent moving along a staircase. Thousands of tourists visit on this date, but the trick is to come a day or two before or after, when the phenomenon is just as apparent, but there are far fewer visitors. In New York, the World Trade Center site is set to open to the public for the first time in 10 years. The 9/11 Memorial will be dedicated on September 11th and will open to visitors the following day. There'll be a 6-acre plaza with waterfalls, and walls will be lined with the names of the nearly 3,000 victims who died a decade ago. Thanks for checking in with my Insider Guide this month. Until next time, happy traveling.
Thanks, Michelle. See you next month. Now, a new film directed by Madonna has been grabbing the headlines at this year's Venice Film Festival. It's called W.E. and it's based on the story of a woman who becomes obsessed with the intertwined lives of the uncrowned King Edward VIII and Wallis Simpson.
With your brother and sister-in-law.
They are rather dull, aren't they?
They'll never accept me.
You're going to let Bertie and Elizabeth dictate our future?
It isn't just Bertie and Elizabeth, it's everyone.
It won't be once we're married.
David, let's stop all this talk about marriage. It frightens me and I can't see any good coming of it.
After the abdication in 1936, the newly named Duke and Duchess of Windsor spent most of their time in exile in Paris. But at weekends, they like to retreat to an estate in the countryside, just on the outskirts of the city. That's now been renovated and turned into an upmarket holiday home. So we sent Sylvia Smith to the village of Gif-sur-Yvette to look around.
An old stone French country house, about half an hour outside Paris. The sun has never quite set on its good fortune. From watermill to painter's studio, and then to its grandest incarnation, the country residence of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. Jeanette David's father was gardener to Edward VIII, the only English king to abdicate.
My
father used to speak with the Duke from time to time. The Duke liked to walk around the property, notably in the fields and along the river with my father. My father was very talkative, so he always had something to say, anecdotes and so on. The Duke was pleased, of course.
A favourite with the Windsor's pugs, it was a hideaway for the couple, and is again for those keen on a holiday with a fascinating history attached. The nearby village of Gif-sur-Yvette has changed only slowly over the decades.
When the Duke and his wife Wallis arrived in France after the war in the 1950s, they learned that Durian was trying to sell his mill. Having rented it at first, they decided to buy it. They really fell in love with the property. They had it done up, especially the gardens. They brought over the landscape gardener Russell Page for the occasion. So they had everything renovated at huge expense, and Wallis decided to rename the moulin, calling it the Moulin de la Tuilerie.
Et Wallis a décidé de rebaptiser le moulin et l'a appelé le Moulin de la Tuilerie.
The Duke's crest adorns the wall of his former bedroom. The whole house has been renovated, but not so as to obliterate the spirit of its former owners. It's not just the main house, but the guest cottages too, and all the doors are now open for paying guests who can walk in the footsteps of the Windsors' celebrity friends.
Well, they would come here at weekends really to get away from the formality of their life in Paris. They entertained a great deal here, and some of their friends included Marlene Dietrich, Richard Burton, Elizabeth Taylor, Maria Callas and Cecil Beaton. When they travelled down here at weekends, they would bring with them a whole entourage of servants and make sure that everything was prepared perfectly for their guests.
If you want to read all the biographies and histories ever published in English about the man who put love above duty, there are plenty of books around to dip into. Opinion, of course, remains divided on a prince who provoked the scandal of the 20th century and whose actions could have toppled the British monarchy on the eve of the Second World War. But it's the small details that really tell you about the Duke.
When he went for a walk, he always had a band of little dogs following him around. He was always very happy with his little dogs, very content, which is good.
One of the chief attractions of the Moulin de la Tuilerie are the grounds and gardens.
Et il y avait beaucoup de fleurs, effectivement, mais pas.
There were lots of flowers, but when the Duchess had guests, the garden was always in flower. How did she do that? She had flowering plants brought in pots and they would bury them in the earth. That way she could change them according to whoever was coming and have the flowering plants that she wanted. In the garden, all the plots were surrounded by box hedge.
Toutes les parcelles étaient entourées de bordures de buis.
You can't escape the Windsors. Their pictures are everywhere, along with photographs of their famous house guests. Even the Duke of Edinburgh spent time in the gardens, examining the Duke's favourite plants that had been sent over from England. It's a setting that inevitably provokes debate about this period of history. Even without the connection to these romantic historic figures, the house and its setting would be idyllic. But the indelible connection with the Windsors just adds that certain je ne sais quoi.
Sylvia Smith there reporting from the Windsors' former estate in Gif-sur-Yvette in France. If only walls could talk. Well, sadly, that's all we've got time for this week on Fast Track, but join us again next week when we'll be marking the 10th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks by talking to one of America's big players in the travel industry about how the landscape has been changed by those attacks. In the meantime, don't forget, if there's anything from this week's programme that you'd like to see again, or perhaps forward on to a friend, then check out our website at bbc.com/fasttrack. Whilst over on bbc.com/travel this weekend, you'll find out how to get the best out of a business trip to Sydney and discover why the Speakeasy is making a comeback in Philadelphia. In the meantime, from me, Raj and Datar, and the rest of the Fast Track team, thank you very much for watching, and wherever you're heading next, have a good trip. Goodbye.